Hello everyone, thanks for watching. I'm going to go over 4 different functions of the Snap-on Verus Edge. First, we're going to jump on how to use the triggers within the scanner data, which will allow you to get an audible tone when your minimum or maximum range is reached, and it'll also save a file for you. After that, we will go into the guided component test, which allows us to open up a separate oscilloscope or graphic multimeter window while we're still using our scanner. And this is a benefit that you can take advantage of. Let's say you're in bidirectional controls and you want to verify that an output is actually taking place. After that, we will go into the oscilloscope and go over how to manipulate the zoom functions to take full advantage of Snap-on's buffer design. After that, we're going to go over how to set up an email client. Now, going back to the email, at least in my version 17.4, there's a problem with the email function in the diagnostic suite where it attempts to send a file. It will actually corrupt the file and you will not be able to access the file again, and whoever you are sending the file to will receive an email without an attachment. So we'll go over the steps and exactly how that looks. I did contact Snap-on. They said they were aware of it, at least with my version, and that they're working on a fix to be released soon, I hope. You still have the ability to email your files through your File Explorer as an attachment. Again, just keep in mind that at least with 17.4, you can't just hit the email button that's on the top bar in your data manager. Now, we're going to go ahead and hit the home button, open up our scan tool, and we're going to select the demo vehicle to learn how to use the trigger functions. We have our 06 Tahoe. It'll load up the vehicle. Hit continue. We're going to go into engine, data display. We'll select engine data. Once it loads, I'm going to create a custom list of only 4 PIDs to make this a little easier to look at while we're setting up the trigger. So we'll deselect all, and each one that we highlight will be selected to view. Go ahead and hit list view. Now there's 3 dots at the end of the parameter ID, the PID. You go ahead and hit those 3 dots on the top right and you're going to get a drop menu. From that drop menu, you want to go ahead and select setup. Turn on the trigger by checking the box, and you can select your minimum and your maximum limits at the point you want that trigger to go off. So we're going to go with 500 and 3000 RPM. Keep in mind the trigger is not armed until the pictorial of that camera is highlighted green. So if you can see, our blue and our red lines are there indicating the trigger levels. Now we can go ahead and turn on the trigger. Now it is armed. So when that RPM reaches either our low of 500 or a maximum of 3000 RPM, which it will shortly, we're going to get a loud beep and it's going to save the capture momentarily. That red line is a timestamp of when you actually crossed your trigger. So that's automatically saved. I'm going to turn the volume on that for a second. So that's been saved to our data manager, and now we can go back to our data manager in our folder and access that file or review. Exit out of here. We'll head home, data manager. Let's go up 1 folder so we can access our scanner data folder. And we'll scroll and search for our demo vehicle that was done today, which should be right here. We'll open up that file and we'll be able to review it in the shop stream application that's in the diagnostic suite. Now, as you can see, the RPM is right there with a red marker indicating when the trigger was crossed, and the file can be reviewed. This is a very good idea when you're on a test drive. You want to keep your eyes on the road. That audible beep will help you identify when the trigger was crossed. I personally like using it a lot while I'm setting monitors for an emissions vehicle. It helps me be aware of exactly if monitors are running while I'm driving, and I can keep my eyes on the road. So from here, we're going to go ahead and go into a live car, which is going to be a 2013 Impala, and we'll be exhibiting how to operate a bidirectional command while monitoring the scope window. So you'll be able to actually have one window that's going to have your scan tool on there, and another window that's going to be either your graphing multimeter or oscilloscope. That way you can make sure that the commands you're sending are being executed, or you can compare raw data versus the processed data that the scan tool is showing you. So once we have identified the vehicle, we're going to go into output controls, and we're going to go ahead and select the evap vent solenoid. So in this screen, we can either clean up the list by going into a custom list and selecting less PIDs, or we can leave this the way it is. We'll leave this full list right now and go ahead and go back to our home area in our diagnostic suite, and we're going to select guided component tests. Depending what test you select, it's either going to be a graphing multimeter or an oscilloscope. If you notice, our vehicle automatically will transfer over from our scan tool into the guided component test to give us the corresponding information. We're going to go ahead and select the vent solenoid, and we're going to do a DC voltage test. That will also provide the component information along with a button in the bottom left to open up a meter in the bottom of the screen. Once your meter opens up in the bottom of the screen, you can hit the meter button on the top one more time to turn it into a full screen. Selecting this button in the bottom, it's going to do the same thing as data. And you can see that your live minimum and maximum values will be displayed, and you can manipulate your sweep and your voltages. If you notice here that we have the ability to set the sweep for minutes, that's a clear indication that you're in a graphing multimeter. And it also tells you on the top of the window where it says graphing multimeter sweep setup. You definitely want to use this for things that don't have a high frequency, because this does not have a high sampling rate. If you're going to be using something with a higher resolution, like fast sensors or maybe a data bus, you definitely want to make sure that you're in the oscilloscope function. So if we go back into our scan tool, now we can execute this bidirectional command. I'm going to manipulate the window to fit both of them in my screen. So I'll use the half left for my scan tool, and then on the half right, I'm going to set up my scope window. So I have channel 1 set up with the control side, which is the white wire on this component. The PCM sends a ground control to the vent solenoid, and channel 2 is going to be the 12-volt supply. Once I have everything set up the way that I need it, I'll go back to the scan tool, and this usually works when you hit on. I think it got a little goofed up when I was switching screens back and forth. It's not a big deal. It will respond when I hit the off function. Again, that's not normal. It's supposed to shut the vent valve when you select on, not off. As you see there, it responded, and it will be switching back and forth as I'm executing the command on the scan tool. I definitely wanted to leave it this way where it's goofing up. I want to make a clear point that, you know, this thing's definitely not perfect. You just want to learn to understand the tool. And it's going to have mistakes like this, and you just got to learn how to work through them and understand them, so you don't get confused with your testing. You want to be aware of how it's supposed to work. If we hit the maximize button on here, we're going to be able to go back into turning this into just one whole window with the diagnostic suite. So exiting out of there, I go ahead and hit home, and I go back into guided component tests, and I maximize it. It just brought it all together again. So my scope viewer is gone, and my graphing multimeter is back into my diagnostic suite window. We can turn some cursors on to get some measurements. This is a basic function of the tool as well, and you can see on the bottom right the measurements. So now we're going to go ahead and switch over and go into our oscilloscope, which is in lab scope, a 4-channel lab scope. Now I have a signal generator attached to channel 1. I'm going to go ahead and turn off these cursors for now. Now this is very important. A lot of times in this type of oscilloscope, we're trying to capture a lot of detail in one screen, but the effect of that is that we lose a lot of detail in our pattern. As you see here, this is supposed to be a square wave, but it has very jagged edges, which would make it look like something has been compromised out of this signal that's supposed to have a square wave. But this is actually an acquisition error. Our sweep, which is the time across our screen, is incorrect. We need to collect the waveform with the detail live as we would want to review it. So I'm going to adjust the scale here to have a lower voltage to fill up the screen. But most importantly, I'm going to change this from 20 seconds to a much faster rate. So we'll go ahead, go into our sweep setup, and we're going to go with 500 milliseconds. And then 20 milliseconds, and then 10. Now at 10 milliseconds, we have a lot of fine detail. The edges are very sharp. And that's how we would want to analyze a signal with all the detail. Now we hit the magnifying glass to hit the zoom function, and it tapes all of our sweeps together into one big screen. Nothing goes missing from all the screens we collected. Now that dotted line is used as a marker to tell where we want to zoom and what area of the waveform we want to focus on. So as we go through the multiplier and zoom back into how we gather the data, the whole idea of this is to gather with all the detail, and then you zoom back out to analyze the waveform from all the captures or all the sweeps that it went through to fill up its buffer. So this might be counterintuitive if you're used to using different scopes. One example, let's say Pico, that you can fill up the screen with a lot of information and you have the ability to zoom into a small window. This is going to be backwards. We'll gather our data with a lot of fine detail, and then we will zoom out to review it. So we're going to start by minimizing our diagnostic suite window, open up Internet Explorer, and we are going to search in our Google search bar for Mailbird, which is the application we'll be using today. Mailbird is the one I've been using. There's a lot of them out there, and I believe Snap-on also uses Mailbird in their user's manual in reference to sending emails through the tool. So once we get into getmailbird.com, it's going to pop up with the option for a free download in the top right corner. We're going to go ahead and start that download. This is a video here that might start playing like a tutorial during the download. I go ahead and close that out. We'll accept the agreement. There's where you can select the installation language. You're going to get a window that comes up. Once you completed the download, you can go ahead and close that out. It's just showing you that your download was successful. In the background, the Mailbird application is already attempting to start. So at this point, you're going to go ahead and enter your email address, the one that you would like to attach to this software. Now, it says here that it has found the settings for the email that I'm using, which is using an AOL account. I found there to actually be a problem with that as well. I had several attempts using the settings that they had, and I was unsuccessful. I ended up having to look up what settings AOL uses while setting up an account like this. Now, if you pay attention in the server name, it says Yahoo, which I found to be a little bit odd. So we're going to go ahead and go over the steps on how to get the information for my AOL account. And whichever account you will be using, it'll be very similar the way you will acquire that information that you need. So once I get into Google again, I'm going to look into the AOL settings for this, which are the AOL SMTP server. And the very first hit is going to have the most valuable information. So the second line there, IMAP AOL, it's the same server type, IMAP, and I'm going to go ahead and fill that in the server name. So for the incoming server, we're going to fill in the correct information, which is imap.aol.com. And we also have to update our port number to 993, which that one was correct to begin with. Now for our outgoing server, which is the third row in our search results, it's smtp.aol.com. And the port is 587. We'll update the port number 587 and update the address here. Now we hit continue and we are in. This program has a lot of available add-ons and plugins that you can add on in the future. I'm going to go ahead and skip over these. You're going to get an option for a different layout. And we do not want to add any more accounts at this time. And now all of my information is loading. Now, if we open up our diagnostic suite and attempt to send out an email, we're going to go over how that actually corrupts files with the issue that Snap-on is having. I have an example from one file that I tried to email before recording the video, and it actually ruined it, which is this one here. It's going to say that the file cannot be found. So we have a good file here, and we can open it just fine. It's a screenshot. So let's exit out, and now we're going to attempt to use the email function within the tool. It has the ability to do so because we installed Mailbird, and this is an issue related to the software, not any issue with whatever mail server you're using. I'm going to email it to myself. The file is attached. We're going to go ahead and hit send. Now, the mail will go out, the email will go out to the person you addressed it to, but when they try to open it, the file will not be found. Now, the file that I attached to this email is now corrupted and it's not going to open in this tool. So you have to be very careful in not using this function until Snap-on gets this corrected. Well, I'd like to say thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thanks again.